Well, hello. What we have here is a developing diagram of an animal cell. And so, what do we have so far? Well, we've got the outside boundary, which is called what? The plasma membrane. Plasma indicating kind of fluidy, flexible, membrane indicating a thin layer. And what is the primary component of the plasma membrane? It's that phospholipid bilayer we've talked about before. Phospholipid bilayer, we saw it in the previous video. That's a very, very thin layer. And what else? Well, we have the nucleus. Now, one of my little bandwagons is to make sure students leave this course able to pronounce this word correctly. Say, what's the big deal, Professor? Well, I've heard movie actors in movies, I've heard broadcasters, I've heard even presidents of the United States mispronounce this simple word. What? What are you talking about, Professor? Well, I heard not too long ago a president talk about the possibility of a certain nation getting nuclear weapons. I'm here to tell you that nation will never get nuclear weapons. Now, they could possibly get nuclear weapons. Yeah, they could. And so this is not a nucleus, this is a nucleus. Nucleus. And so, if you're a famous broadcaster, a news person, or a movie actor, or maybe even President of the United States someday, and I hear you talk about this, I hope you'll make me proud and speak of nucleus and nuclear. There you go. Well, we see the boundary around the nucleus called the nuclear envelope. Well, why is it called the nuclear membrane? Well, it used to be. You wouldn't have to go back too far in textbooks, maybe about 20 years or so, and you'd see it's called the nuclear membrane. You say, well, gee, what, some people got nothing better to do than sit around and change names? Actually, there's a reason for this. It was discovered fairly recently that the nuclear envelope is indeed composed of this phospholipid bilayer, but actually not a single phospholipid bilayer, but we can represent it like this. A double phospholipid bilayer. And so a double phospholipid bilayer, when somebody figured that out, it was suggested that the name be changed from membrane to envelope to express the idea that there's something different about the nuclear envelope compared to all the other membranes in the cell. So, nuclear envelope. The nucleus itself has got a lot of things inside, including DNA. We talked about that earlier. What's the total length of DNA in every human cell nucleus? Oh, yeah, 6 feet. 6 feet of DNA in every human cell nucleus. Goodness gracious. Then I've got this little area designated. I'm talking about all the area in here. And you should have looked that up before you watched this movie. What's the term for that particular area? It is called the cytoplasm. And the cytoplasm, by definition, is everything between what and what? Everything inside the plasma membrane, everything outside the nucleus. So it's anything and everything that's in that particular area. And so within the cytoplasm, there's actually 3 categories of things. We're going to discuss 2. One is the truly liquidy part of the cytoplasm. And what is the term for that? The truly liquidy part of the cytoplasm is called the what? The cytosol. In cyto, anytime you see cyto, that means what? Cell. And sol is related to the word solution. We're familiar with that. So the cytosol is the truly liquidy part of the cytoplasm. And it's mostly what liquid? Mostly this one right here. And so we're supposed to drink a fair amount of this to keep our cytoplasm from becoming what? Depleted of water, becoming dehydrated. Yes, indeed. Now there's something else in the cytoplasm that's pretty obvious in the diagram of cell. All those structures in there. And what is the term for those structures? The term is organelles. Organelles, little organs, little structures that have a special purpose. Each one has a different kind of purpose. Organelles, mitochondria have a different function than chloroplast, and those are two organelles that were asked about in your study guide. Let me write the first one down. A big long word, mitochondria. Now, in writing mitochondria, have I written the singular or the plural? So who knows? Who cares? Well, you know, I care, it's all right. And so that happens to be the plural form. You say, well, what's the singular? It is mitochondrion. That is the singular form. And so one mitochondrion, two mitochondria. See, I've never heard of a word like that. Yes, you have, and this is another one that I hear mispronounced fairly often on the broadcasters and so forth. It's the word criterion. Criterion. Singular or plural. That one's the singular one. If you have more than one criterion, you have what? Criteria. Criteria. One criterion, two criteria. What do I often hear or even read sometimes? I hear something like this. The criteria was. No, the criteria wasn't. Maybe the criteria were. Yes. Or the criteria are. If you have a criterion, that is. Criterion is. Or the criterion was. And so forth. All right. That's me. Sorry. Last organelle that we will mention is not in the animal kingdom diagram. It's in the plant kingdom one that we'll kind of talk about here in just a second briefly. And what are those? Those are the little round green things. What are those called? Chloroplasts. We saw a picture in the last video with cells chock full of chloroplasts. What are they involved with? Well, something called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. All right, let's briefly then switch from animal cells to plant cells. And if you flip over to the plant cell diagram in your book, you'll see many of the same things you saw in the animal cell diagram, but there are some differences. One is you've got some chloroplasts, talking plant cells now. And the other is what's on the outside. What's on the outside makes a plant cell, when you look at one through a microscope, look more like a box than a fried egg. And what is the outer boundary of a plant cell? It's something called a cell wall. And so we've actually talked about cell walls earlier when we were talking about complex carbohydrates, right? So what is the primary component of cell walls? A complex carbohydrate called cellulose. Yeah, cellulose. Cell wall, cellulose. What does the cellulose cell wall do for plant cells? Well, the same thing our skeleton does for us. Provides support, structure, and so forth. Helps that plant be able to stand up in the air. Without its cell walls, it would not be able to do so. Last thing, in that diagram in your book of a plant cell, is there a plasma membrane in that diagram? Yes, there is. This is on the outside? No, it's not. Where is it? Well, we can see it just inside. I'm not going to draw it all the way around. And the question in your study guide says, in a happy plant cell, where's the plasma membrane located? We're going to look at some unhappy plant cells in another unit soon. But we can see it. It is right. It's right up against the cell wall, just inside the cell wall. This is the plasma membrane. And it's not just sitting there. In a happy plant cell, the water pressure is very high inside the cell, and that presses the plasma membrane against the inside of the cell wall. So in a happy plant cell, the plasma membrane is pressed against the inside of the cell wall. Well, that concludes our introduction to cells.